Black people still don't get it.
Organize, sit down, reason and talk. Welcome to the final WhatsApp reflection for 2020, a year of tumultuous challenges. From George Floyd to COVID-19 and the numerous losses that we have seen over the year. As per usual, this reflection is finely balanced on those three important pillars of low stress, no harm, and love in all things we do. I left the last WhatsApp reflection pondering the Moorish question. But what is the Moorish question, you ask? Well, it's a good thing you asked me that, because I'm going to tell you. But before I answer that, I have another question for you. Can you name a period in history over the last 500 years where African people, or black people, just in case you're uncomfortable calling yourself African, have lived alongside Europeans without having their creations stolen, refashioned, and given back to them, having full control of their land, wealth, and not being exploited, and where the Africans lived free to their own desires without fear of danger from European culture, otherwise known as white supremacy? If you could answer those three questions, I'd love to hear the answers. I'm interested to hear your answers, as I couldn't identify such a period in time over the last 500 years myself. But this could be a black swan moment. You know, just because you haven't seen a black swan doesn't mean that there aren't any out there. Back to the Moorish question. First off, calling it a Moorish question is a bit misleading. The Moorish question could also be called the Cometian or Egyptian question, or even the African or black people question. As I stated in the last WhatsApp reflection, European culture has a familiar point of return, a RTZ factor, which is to control the way that Africans see themselves. To achieve this, European culture insists that Africans must see themselves the way that European culture sees them. To achieve this, European power structure uses violence and then moves to systems of pervasive, insidious programming, such as religion, sports, and culture, to implant their eyes in the African mind, with the prospect of violence never being far away. This European power structure RTZ factor is demonstrated in two main events where African people were central characters in founding what would become known as European culture or Western culture. The first of these two events is the period in time when Greeks such as Thales of Miletus, Solon, Plato, Eudoxus of Sindus actively studied in Kemet or Egypt. George G. James, in his book Stolen Legacy, The Egyptian Origins of Western Philosophy, writes, "It was Herodotus that stated, almost all the names of the gods came into Greece from Egypt." Why did they go to Africa? Wouldn't they have considered Africa primitive? And what were these Greeks studying? The Greeks knew very well, just like the world knows now, that Africa holds all the learning for the history and uniqueness of human beings.
Hello and welcome again to UCL Global Health. We have a very distorted view of Africa. I think many people think that Africa's development has been something that's only occurred in the last century. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Kevin Macdonald, who's Professor of African Archaeology at UCL, and you specialise particularly in West Africa.
That's right.
But this image is completely wrong, because for example, what was West Africa like where you know about, say, 2,000 years ago?
Well, about 2,000 years ago, we already were beginning to have the first urban centres in West Africa.
So towns?
Towns.
So these weren't hunter-gatherer people?
No, these were cities of 10, 20,000 people. in the early first millennium AD. And if we go back before that, into an area which is now the Mauritanian desert, there was a state contemporary with Kerma in the Nile Valley over in Sudan, in Mauritania, called Tichit, or at least it's in a region known as Tichit. We're not really sure what it called itself. But there we have a very sophisticated social formation with hundreds of settlements and some things that would certainly be the size of towns by 1200 BC.
Wow.
Dr. Phil Valentine asked us to name another country with the word ology behind its name. Ology meaning the study of. There is none but Egyptology. A very intriguing question and realization. The realization is Europeans' power structure wants to know all it can about the African. From living within nature's laws in the rolling green valleys of Ethiopia to the erection of the Sphinx. And while I mention that, check out the Orion constellation theory when you've got time. It's amazing stuff. Europeans were then, as now, studying knowledge that in the main came down from Kush and Ethiopia into Kemet. That made Kemet such an advanced country in its time, once that knowledge was amplified by the River Nile.
Egypt has always traditionally been given prominence as the height of ancient culture. Nubia is now coming into its own and is being understood to be of equal importance. It is different from ancient Egypt, but it is equally important and not just an adjunct to this Egyptian culture. What archaeologists do when they pull material from the ground or when they translate texts, they bring their own cultural baggage to that interpretation and the baggage of the times that they live in. And so it's imperative that we go back and continually reassess the things that we take as facts. Many of the early archaeologists came to the study of ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia from the perspective of Semitic languages or the study of the Hebrew Bible. And it was very important to them to bring Egypt specifically into the sphere of biblical studies. And so they had to carve Egypt away from Africa to bring it into that sphere. And the way that they did that was they used race. So these early archaeologists effectively made ancient Egypt white in the sense that they made it part of a dominant Western culture, and ancient Nubia was separated from that. It was black. And this was how they took Egypt out of Africa and put it into this Semitic sphere, this biblical sphere. And it's only in recent decades, the last 3-4 decades, that Egyptology has really moved away from that. And scholars who are studying Nubia are really given the chance to give a voice to this Nubian material that it wasn't given much of a chance to have in the past.
When we start to scratch the surface, there's a black man underneath it. Because there is absolutely no question that the so-called Greek miracle would not have been possible without the contributions of the Egyptians. And there is no question among the Greeks that those Egyptians they met and found were black Africans.
However, despite the sharing of information and being exposed to the Comitian consciousness, and despite the Greeks knowing that they had learned directly from the Africans, we still ended up with the Greco-Roman Empire. The spreading of a whitened version of humanity, first through violence and then through its ultimate tool, Christianity. The Greco-Roman mind had manipulated that African learning to manufacture the Bible among many other things, giving no credit to its African origins.
Well, I don't know if the Holy Bible was put together by the white supremacists or not. That's controversial. Some people say yes, some people say no. I say I don't know.
Okay.
But I do know this. Whatever the white supremacists touch, they are not going to fool with it for 5 minutes unless they figure out a way in 5 minutes to put it to work for the system of white supremacy. They'll find something else to touch. So if a white supremacist puts his hand on a Bible or her hand on a Bible, they are going to say, now, this Bible is already here, but I am going to use it to do the things that I want to do. And I'm going to make everybody else of color fall in line so that this Bible will support whatever it is that I want done. And I will even change the meaning of every passage of it without changing a word. I'll just say, that's not what that means. And the black preacher will say, that is what that means. It's right here in the Bible. But the white supremacists say, boy, what did I say it meant? It meant that yesterday. Why? Because I said that it meant that yesterday. But that's not what it means today, boy. Hey, who is your master here on earth? Your master in your heart and in your head and in your church that I allow you to have is somebody else. What you call your God, and that's okay, I'll let you do that. But boy, when I walk in your church, with or without a gun, you will, and you and your congregation, your choir, and everybody you got here, young and old, will and have obeyed me from day one. So don't get in my face waving a Bible, boy.
Maybe that's just a coincidence, you say. It could be unintentional. After all, no one is that cunning. Well, the second significant event may change your mind on this, happening solely by chance. The second event was when the Moors ran large parts of Spain and Portugal, known as Al-Andalus or Andalusia. By the time the Moors entered into Spain, this period in European civilization was named by Europeans as the Dark Ages. It was the entry of the Moors into Spain that saw, over a period of time, a re-education of Europe to the Greek classics, irrigation technology, numbers, don't forget they were counting with letters, city building, governance, underfloor heating, chivalry, which means the management of horses, and a whole host of things that Europeans did not have.
But what did the Moors bring to Europe? Why is it that Spain and Portugal, where the Moors were strongest, why is it that they led the expansion of Europe? Why is it that the thrust into America, into Africa, was led by Spain and Portugal? What special advantages did they have over the rest of Europe, and to what extent did the Moors have something to do with this? And here we come to their contributions. When the Moors entered Spain under Tariq in 711 AD, Europe was in the Dark Age. Whatever the Greeks may have done, whatever the Romans may have done, Europe had fallen into grave decline. European science was a joke compared to African and Asian science. The Europeans, for example, one of them was trying to show that the distance from the Earth to the Moon was the diameter of the Earth. In order to write the diameter of the Earth, he calculated or estimated the circumference and divided it by 2. That was the level of science. There was no complex mathematics, no complex science either in Spain or any part of Europe at that time. Many advances that had been made by the Greeks and Romans were lost. So that when Chandler calls his article Light of Europe's Dark Age, this is a very true and precise statement of what was happening. Then comes the Moors. And the Moors caused a massive movement of knowledge into the places where they settled. Thus we find that Spain becomes the main center for the translation of all the works of antiquity. Egyptian works and all other works that are translated into Arabic, then they're translated into Spanish, then they're translated into Latin. Thus Europe becomes open, and the Muslims become open to the knowledge of the world. They thrust into India, they bring back various things. How many of us know that the Europeans only counted with letters? The Europeans did not have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you talk about Roman numerals, it's IX and X, and those are letters. The Greeks used letters to count with. The Romans used letters. It is the Indians, the Hindu, who had those numerals, and Arabs brought it out of India. Many things were brought out of Egypt. Many things were brought out of various parts of the world in order to build what was later to be known as Western civilization. So that we have an extraordinary situation. One of the things that is most remarkable is that the very things that were used to defeat us came from outside of Europe. Artillery, firearms are not European in origin. People like to say, oh, we defeated you because we had superior firepower. Where did they get it from? The Arabs. A manuscript in Leningrad, an Arabic manuscript, shows the first use of artillery by the Moors in a battle with the Indians. The chemical components of gunpowder are developed through the chemistry of the Moors. The Europeans do not know about gunpowder. Gunpowder had been used even earlier by the Egyptians, but it was not used in the way it was used by the Europeans later on. But the Arabs used it in that way. They did use it in artillery. And the first firing of artillery in the world is by the Moors. And the ships were so absolutely critical to the expansion of the European empire. Look at those ships. Take the caravel, for example, the Portuguese caravel. The Spanish caravel come from the Arabic carabos, which comes from the pangalos, which is used on the Indian Ocean by both Arabs and Africans. The rudders, the special rudder, the four-cornered axial rudder, is found in China 206 BC, but long before it is found in China and brought by the Arabs, by the Moors into Europe, we find the prototype of that rudder lies with the Egyptians. The forerunner of the axial rudder is found among one of the Egyptian types of oars which operate in that way. We also find that many of the nautical instruments, the compass, the astrolabe, are not invented in Europe. They are brought in by the Moors from other parts of the world, so that Spain, where the Moors concentrated, became a center through which all of these things coalesce. That is the reason why Spain was able to make the first major thrust, and Portugal not because of any other special advantage, in one of the great centers of the Moors in Europe. In Cordova, the old Pact Cordova, they found a city of 250,000 houses and 1 million people, when no city in Europe outside Moorish Spain had a population of 30,000. Its massive walls had a circuit of 14 miles and had 7 large iron gates faced with brass. Its streets were paved so soundly indeed that in some of them you tread the same stones today. Just as you cross the Guadalquivir on the same noble bridge, drained by large sewers, flushed with water from the many fountains which sparkled in the sun and lit by lamps at night. It had 80,455 shops, besides 4,300 markets, and in these you could buy amber from the Baltic, Russian furs, Chinese tea, Indian spices, African ebony and ivory, and such native products in leather, metal, silk, glass, and pottery as could not be found elsewhere. It had 900 public baths.
If you are interested in this history, read the book The Golden Age of the Moors by Ivan van Sertima. A brilliant read, and I would recommend reading it with the whole family. Despite being brought out of the Dark Ages by the Africans, we still ended up by 1492 1 year after officially ridding themselves of the last Moors, we still ended up with Columbus setting sail on a genocidal capitalist mission using African technology to bring the world under the control of the state in the name of a white god. And don't forget that Columbus was blessed both by the state and the church. I started this post by saying that Europeans need to control the way that Africans see themselves. How do you see yourself? Neely Fuller Jr. says, everything about you and everything you think you know about you is often shaped by white supremacy, a frightening but also alluring point of view. The primary group that needs to answer this question on why European culture has this RTZ button of controlling the way the African sees themselves is the white people themselves. Another sub-question implied within the Moorish question is, when will we learn as a people that this is just how their culture works? It sees things either black or white. What is this thing beneath the culture that has such a hold on them? Dr. Francis Cress Welsing put forward a diamond-cut, arresting idea as to why this European RTZ button exists.
The fear is that the black male can cause white genetic annihilation.
All over the place. You're a psychiatrist, and you're author of a theory. Here's what she's saying. First of all, white people are dying out. Into the next century, everybody on Earth may be of color. And we're scared about it. Already we're a minority. Did you know that? I'll guess 25% of us are white, maybe less than that. And that's the reason we're racist. We're not only afraid of dying out, but we're also jealous because we have no color. You're laughing. How come we spend so much time in the sun trying to get brown? You believe we're racist? No, we're not racist. Yes, we are racist. What is this, an accident that all the cities are becoming blacker and blacker while the outer reaches of major metropolitan whiter and whiter? That's an accident? Oh, come on. When you get on an elevator and you're the only white person on the elevator, how do you feel? What'd she say? What'd she say? Frightened, she said? Oh, she's scared of elevators. Okay, here we go. Francis Cress Welsing, M.D. You are a Washington, D.C.-based psychiatrist, and you're author of the Cress, your middle name, we should say, theory of color confrontation and racism. You call racism white supremacy. To be sure, a provocative and controversial theory on skin color and oppression. Well, I'm ready. So is this mostly but not exclusively white audience. Let them have it, Doctor. How? Boy, oh boy, do you need an escort to get out of your speeches?
No, now, let me just give you a little background. This paper was written approximately in 1969 and presented in 1970. It was written for a group of black psychiatrists who were looking at racism.
Yeah.
It was also written because as a psychiatrist and working in a hospital trying to treat black people and white people, but recognizing that the majority of the problems that black patients had in a psychiatric hospital, when you took a history, you would run smack into racism. So I knew I had to understand racism to help solve the mental health problems of black people. So out of my brain computer, putting in the question, why do we see this behavior? Why have we seen it for hundreds of years? So I thought about these two things, basically two facts, that even though the white population says that people of color are minorities, that it is the white population that is the
majority.
The minority on the planet.
That's the reality you're saying.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
That in spite of the fact that black people, non-white people have heard over and over again, you're genetically inferior because you are non-white. That in reality, white skin is a genetic recessive status, not as said by Francis Welsing.
What is
you see? Meaning that if
Meaning that if you and I were to have a baby, the baby would have color, and you make the contribution and I don't.
That white
So
plus
what?
colored, well, wait a minute. It's not Francis Welsing that is concerned about the disappearance of white. Ben Wattenberg just wrote a book, The Birth Dearth. There have been multiple articles in the newspaper talking about the decline of Western populations.
Yeah, here's the Washington Post, just to name one. We are a depopulation bomb, the withering of the Western world. Here, incidentally, this was the percentage of the West's population in 1900, the turn of this century. About 30%. This is where we'll be less than 10% in the year 2075. Here's where we are about today, 15. So we're not having babies.
So whites are not having babies, and there is the concern about white genetic annihilation. In other words, I look at, this is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday holiday, and people will say, well, here's a man who talked about love. Yeah. Why was he killed? And I say that the deeper logic is, what if all black and white people and non-white people and white people love? What would happen to white people? White would disappear. You see, just mix all of the people on the planet up together.
In other words, if race didn't matter, or if color didn't matter, it follows with the jet planes.
No, I'm not saying if it didn't matter. I'm saying that, indeed, if there was a mingling of all of the people, because
that's what I'm saying.
Okay, fine.
Absence of prejudice.
The ability, no, wait, don't confuse what I'm saying. I'm saying that if we mixed all of the people presently on the planet, stirred them up,
the white freckle-faced people would be gone.
Genetic recessive status would disappear. And that if I did a survey and everybody didn't have to, face anybody, if I said how many people who are white want their children to be white, want their grandchildren to be white, want their great-grandchildren to be white, want their great-great-grandchildren to be white. And I've gone all over the country in England and asked this question. Yeah. Everybody wants the children and the generations to remain white. Yes. If you do, then you have to do something to make sure that that happens. And I say that what the thing is that is done, and particularly in relationship to black non-whites, because we have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation.
Because you're the blackest.
Because we, right.
The most color.
Right. We have this ability to produce melanin pigment. We have more of it than anybody else. And so the most pressure is on black people. As a matter of fact, the black people learn, all non-white people over the world learn. If you're black, stay back. If you're yellow, you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, mellow, white, right. I can go to England and the people can just say the same thing. Doesn't matter whether if you go to the Philippines. Because there has been a confrontation of brown with white. Everybody knows the more pigment you have, the more pressure that is on you. Yeah. But they didn't understand why. I say the why is for the purpose of white genetic survival.
All right. And you're saying that blacks have no similar hidden, subconscious anxiety about their blackness being undermined by the presence of white?
We don't have that fear. And I think that this is something that is not understood. You see, in other words, if I don't worry about, as a matter of fact, under white supremacy, the non-white people try to get lighter. You see, because the less pigment you have, the less threat you are to white, and so the greater opportunity that you have. If Mr. Black and Mr. White live next door to each other, they have the same job, the same income, the same car, the same furniture. Yeah. They both walk out of the house in the morning. Good morning, Mr. Black. Good morning, Mr. White. Yeah. But Mr. White is still looking, but you've got something that I don't have.
You're saying he's saying that subconsciously.
Saying, right.
Now, wait a minute. All right, we'll give you a chance in just a moment.
Wait a minute.
Now, wait a minute.
Let's look at
They're nice people. You're really going to like them, I promise you. Once in a while, a couple of them stop before they come up here, and you got to keep an eye on them.
Let's look at this.
Go ahead, look at it.
Very fortunately.
Now, let me just understand this. See, the reason they're groaning is, that's an awful bad rap to take. Let me just, arrogantly try and reword what I think you're saying. Now, don't get crazy. Let me say.
Please, I'm a
Mr.
psychiatrist.
White is looking at Mr. Black, and he's not consciously saying, don't you
Not
dare.
consciously.
So it is under here.
Not consciously. I mean, we could go on for 3 hours. Not
No, we
consciously.
All right. All right.
Okay. I am saying that this behavior is at the subconscious level. Wants to look at it later. 66% of white adults think they look better with a tan. 70% of white adolescents think they look better with a tan. What do white people? Ooh, I look so pale. Now, this is not something that Francis Welsing is putting on people. White females even say their ideal mate is who? Tall, dark, and handsome.
I know you want to add to this or make it just a little more complicated. The black male was lynched and often castrated because of the white male fear of the black male's, the myth is the black male's extraordinary sexual capacity. So he was lynched by frightened white males who feared that if he ever got anywhere near the white women, that somehow the white male would be a Now,
Well,
you want to
wait a
add
minute.
to
Now,
that.
his sexual capacity. What are we talking about? I say that the fear is that the black male can cause white genetic annihilation. And this is why the attack on the genitals, there's no history in the world of any non-white men attacking white men's genitals. But why do white men feel the need to zero in on the black man's genitals and cut them off?
Yeah.
The fear is that the black male can cause white genetic annihilation. The fear is that the black male can cause white genetic annihilation.
That said, there looms another haunting question for us as African people, which is, can we get it? Another high priestess of African thinking, Dr. Barbara Sizemore, didn't think so.
About what's happening to our children in public schools. Now, most of the time when I come over here, that's what I talk to you about, because that's really where my life is centered. But it occurred to me that Alton's been in this struggle, and I'm very concerned about how we're progressing in it. So I thought a lot about it, sisters and brothers, and titled what I want to share with you tonight called Black People Still Don't Get It.
Why has the history of African peoples been erased? Well, we don't live in a fair world. Things aren't fair. You don't get equal opportunities. You get the opportunities that you create for yourself. And if someone gets in there first and they conquer you, they colonize you, they enslave you, they simply make your history disappear to make it look like they conquered, colonized, and enslaved nobodies. When people have a history, that makes you a somebody. So if you remove the history, you become a nobody. And so your history disappearing, nobody's lamenting the loss of that history. That's why conquerors, colonizers, and enslavers make the people whose history they've conquered, colonized, and enslaved disappear.
The Moorish question is a question about empathy. Can people in power empathize with those who lack power or seem to lack power? And can they provide justice as opposed to oppression? I'm going to leave it there and end on a piece of music from KRS-One, and also a question from which you can win one of our proud to be black badges and support Leo Mohammed's cause of building African schools in the United Kingdom. Can you name what the Rock of Gibraltar was called before it was renamed as the Rock of Gibraltar? send your answers to the email address below. This show is sponsored by Sunrise Organic Seamoss, whose purchasing details are in the description below. See you again in 2021.
Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. We want black power. 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 That's right. That's what we want. Black power. We don't have to be ashamed of it.
This is not the regular, this is that boom, blah, blah, blah. Some they call it secular, I just call it black, black, black. Marcus Garvey, Bookman Dottie, bring that army back, back, back. Malcolm X and Kwame Ture, this is where I'm at. If you wanna talk to me about black, black, black. Haile Selassie the first, Negus Nagas, let's talk about that. Kaboom, Nanny Maroon and all the Maroons, let's talk about that. The real Underground Railroad, the first subway for black, black, black. The freedom train begins with your brain. Get in on track. Whether justice or injustice, how do you react? Can you stand there laughing while they shoot us in the black, black, black? This is what some rappers sound like every time they rap. I'm raising up the red and the green and the black, black, black. Even with no cops in the hood, we still hear click, click, clack, clack, clack. I cannot forget my ancestors just because I rap. Look at me from top to bottom. KRS is black, black, black. Get up, get out, speak up, speak out, reach out. This is what black about. Get up, get out, speak up, speak out, reach out. This is what I rap about. Get up, get out, speak up, speak out, reach out. Too many selling out. Get up, get out, reach out, lift out, yes out. Time to ask the question now, are you really black, black, black? It is not a mystery, we under attack. If you're chatting fuckery, you whole our people back. Time to put aside the fantasy and deal with fact. This is not the time to be talking all that crap. Those that talk that crap, are those that don't fight back. You can say what you like, but real skill I never lack. Black is more a consciousness, the way you think and act. Yo, get up, get out, speak up, speak out, reach out. This is what black about. Get up, get out, speak up, speak out, reach out. This is what I rap about. Get up, get out, speak up, speak out, reach out. Too many selling out. Get up, get out, reach out, lift out, get out, lights out.
We have stayed here and we begged the president. We begged the federal government. That's all we've been doing, begging. It's time we stand up and take over. We have to do what every group in this country did. We got to take over the communities where we outnumber people so we can have decent jobs, so we can have decent houses, so we can have decent roads, so we can have decent schools, so we can have decent justice.
Included below are related links to this discussion. Please share, comment, and subscribe. And remember, talk the thing.